Occasionally, someone will ask me, how did you start telling stories? And that's a good question because there was a time when I had no story. So here's how it began. Many years ago, I was taking a hike up in the Catskills. Now, you might want to know that there are, in the Catskill Range, 35 mountains that are above 3,500 feet in elevation. And I'm attempting to hike every one. I have most of them done. Anyway, many years ago I had started, and one day I drove up to the Catskills, parked at the trailhead. There was no one there, and I began the trek up the steep mountain. Now, as I was hiking up the mountain, I started to feel a kind of, I don't know, unusual. Alone, a bit lonely, but there was something else, a bit of unease. Now, there are many who say that the Catskills are magical, mystical, and there are some who say haunted. You've heard of Rip Van Winkle, who fell asleep under a tree in the Catskills, and when he opened his eyes, it was 20 years later. And there was that elderly woman who once told me, she asked me, she says, "You're hiking up that mountain, huh?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, keep an eye out for those little people." I said, "What little people?" "I hear them all the time playing nine pins at night." Nine pins? Anyway, I was hiking up that mountain on that day, and there was something on my mind, so my head started to drop, and I was thinking and walking and thinking and hiking, and when I looked up, the trail didn't look right. I was on a path, but it wasn't rocky, it wasn't going straight up, and so I started looking for the blazes on the trees, the markers. I couldn't find one. I said, well, I'll go a little further, and if I don't see a blaze, I'll retrace my steps. I've done that many times. Well, I followed this well-worn path around the curve, and then I came to an opening in the forest, a clearing. And in the center of that clearing was a small house, a cottage. A neat wooden fence surrounded the cottage, and in the front yard of that cottage was a beautiful flower garden, a profusion of lupins and hollyhocks and rose bushes. It was gorgeous. On the side of that cottage was a vegetable garden. Tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers. They had these saplings that were cut and shaped into teepees with plants climbing up and beans hanging. It was picture postcard pretty. So I looked around and didn't see anybody. Hello, the house? Immediately, a woman popped out of that screen door. As soon as she saw me, she turned around and hollered back into the house. "Harold, another one of them flatlanders got lost again." Well, she looked at me. "Come on in, get a drink of water. I'm sure you're thirsty." And I was. She had a pitcher of ice cold water. She poured me a glass, and it was delicious mountain water. And then oh, something smells good. Yeah, just wait a minute. I got a bread in the oven, and I looked at the fireplace, and there was her husband, Harold, rocking in a little rocking chair, a caned rocking chair, and in his right hand he had a jackknife, and in the other hand he had a piece of wood, and he was whittling. But the fireplace, she had a little fire, even though it was summer, and it was banked in the fireplace, and on the front wall of that fireplace was an opening. It was a kind of oven. She had a loaf of bread. She pulled it out. She cut it. It was steaming. She slathered on a slab of butter, and I ate it. It was the most delicious piece of bread and butter I have ever had in my life. Well, I said, "Thank you so much. It was very kind of you." And I was ready to leave when Harold turned to me and said, "Well, time for you to pay up." I wasn't expecting that, but I thought, oh, yeah, a couple bucks. It was well worth it. So I reached into my back pocket, pulled out my wallet, and Harold looked at me and says, I wouldn't take a penny from you. I looked at him, I said, well, what do you want? He says, tell us a story. And the woman sat down and they both looked at me expectantly. I said, what? What do you mean a story? Tell us a story. And I said, well, I don't have a story. And they both laughed. Oh, tell us a story. Come on, don't kid us. No, I don't. And Harold said, tell me a story that'll make me laugh. Come on, tell me a story that'll make me cry. Oh. Tell me one of them stories that'll make me go, yeah, those are the ones I like the best. Well, I looked at him and I said, honestly, I don't have a story. Well, the two of them looked at each other, shook their heads in disappointment, and the man, Harold, said, well, then take that bucket, go out to the hand pump in the front yard. Oh, look at this, I got a bug going right across my screen. Get out of there, you mosquito. Anyway, Harold said, there's a bucket. Take it out to the hand pump, fill it up with water and bring it back. That'll be your payment. So, embarrassed, I grabbed the bucket, walked outside, put it down under that pump, and I took the handle and I pressed down once and the water filled up 1/3 of the way. I pressed down twice, it filled up 2/3 of the way. On the third pump, when that water filled up to the top, I heard a whistling sound, then a whirring sound, and then a roar in my ears as a wind came out of nowhere. It surrounded me, it enveloped me, and suddenly I felt myself being lifted right off the ground up into the air. I looked down, there was that little cottage. I was higher than the trees. The wind took me up over that Catskill mountain, took me over to the other side and placed me down on the valley floor, right in front of a long, low building. It looked like one of those old farm grange meeting houses. Well, before I could even get my bearings, someone grabbed me by the arm. I looked, there was a woman with long black hair. Come on, Elmer, we're gonna be late. And she grabbed me. I'm not Elmer. But she dragged me right into this building. Well, when I got inside, I saw that on one wall were benches, and seated at those benches were townspeople all dressed in black. On the other wall were benches, and seated on those benches were a group of people all dressed in black. And in the middle of this hall were 2 sawhorses set up with planks of wood going across, and on top of those planks of wood was an open coffin with a man lying inside. And it was at this moment that a short, round, bald-headed fellow got up and made an announcement. Well, it's all well and good that we're here to pay our respects to Hezekiah, but, well, he would want us to be happy and to celebrate his life. And he turned to a little kid. Boy, run to the village. Get the fiddle player and tell him to bring up his fiddle so we could have some music. The woman who had dragged me in, the woman with the long black hair, she made a proclamation. We don't need to get a fiddle player. We have with us the finest fiddle player in all of the Catskills, Elmer. And she turned to me. I looked at her. I don't know one note from the... Before I could say another word, she had put a fiddle into my hand, and it went right up to my neck. She put a bow in my right hand, and that bow immediately went right up to those strings. And that bow went up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. And suddenly, toes were tapping, knees were bending, hands were clapping, skirts were swirling, people were dancing, and I was fiddling, and I was going up and down and up and down and up and down, and people were dancing, and suddenly those strings started to smoke, and one of them popped, and everyone, exhausted, sat down. And that's when that That short, round, bald-headed fellow got up again and he said, well, this was all well and good that we were able to dance for Hezekiah on his last day with us. But it wouldn't be right to send him to his final reward without saying some holy words over him. And again, this fellow turned to that kid. Boy, run down to the village. Get us a preacher. Tell him to come here with the Bible. And the woman with the long black hair, she made another announcement. We don't need to get a preacher. We've got the finest preacher in all of the Catskills right here. And she looked at me. Now, I'm not the guy that you're going to find sitting in the first pew of the church early Sunday morning. I looked at her and said, I don't know how. Before I could say another word, she had put a Bible into my hand and opened it. And suddenly, I was preaching. Fire and brimstone, heaven and hell, and everyone was amening me. And then I got the whole congregation on their feet, and we were singing. I was leading them at the top of our lungs. Rock of ages, cleft for me. Let me hide myself in thee. Our voices wafted out of that building and echoed from mountain to mountain. Everyone sat down. And that's when that short, round, bald-headed fellow got up again. Well, this was all fine and good that we said some holy good words over Hezekiah. But he's not going to rest until we put him into the ground. Where are those fellows going to carry him down to the graveyard? 4 men jumped up. 3 of them were short. One of them was quite tall. Lift Hezekiah up, that fellow said, and they closed the coffin. They put it onto their shoulders. But because 3 were short and 1 was tall, the coffin began to wobble and then shake, and it was going to fall when that short, round, bald-headed fellow said, put Hezekiah down. This won't do, this won't do. He turned to that kid. He said, boy, go down to the village, get the doctor, tell him to come up here with his saw so we could cut the legs off that tall fella so they'll all... I couldn't believe what I had heard. And then that woman, the one with the long black hair, she made another announcement. We don't need to get a doctor. We've got the finest physician in all the Catskills right here. And she turned to me, and I looked at her. I don't even like the sight of blood. Before I could say another word, she had put the knee of that tall fellow in my left hand, put a hacksaw in my right hand, and I found that saw going right to that knee, and I started... I cut off that fellow's leg right below the knee, and then I took that leg, placed it on the side, and I took off about 10 inches. And then I got a needle and thread and stitched it up, did the same thing to the other leg, and then all 4 of these fellows picked up the coffin, put it on their shoulders, and began to walk down to the graveyard. Well, I followed them. They carried Hezekiah through an opening in the stone wall. But as soon as I stepped into that graveyard, I heard a whistling sound, and then a whir, and then a roar, and that wind came and swirled around me, enveloping me, and now I found myself being lifted off the ground. I could see the cemetery below me. I could see that building. I was up above the trees. I went over the mountain, right over that Catskill mountain, and that wind placed me right where I had begun, right next to that hand pump. Well, I raced into the house. Harold and his wife were sitting there, looking at me, and with they both had smiles on their lips. Harold said, well, did you bring the water in? And I looked at him and I said, no, but But boy, do I have a story to tell you. And it's the story that I just related to you. So if you want to start telling stories, my suggestion, go up to the Catskills, take a hike. You'll come back with a good story.